what's your current assessment of global economy and financial markets?
Money supply is declining. PMI, the manufacturing indices are declining. The economy is slowing down. At the same time, there is a shortage of labor. And Powell just said that, hey, we need to increase labor supply. So maybe have immigration or whatever it may be, but those things take time. And so the only thing they can do is whack around the sledgehammer. And there's going to be some damage done along the way.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell's public comments last week that he made at the Brookings Institute. What was notable about that talk?
He talked about a period of subpar growth. That's the higher for longer. Mm-hmm. He, as I mentioned already, he talked about the lack of labor supply, and he specifically talked about the pandemic having a net immigration deficit and deaths. About 1.5 million workers are missing through that. And then the other thing he talked about more than once is asset prices. Asset prices being a channel for which to conduct policy. So not exactly suggesting that he is in favor of higher asset prices. And somehow the market took that as a positive. Now, part of it is that you got to go back a few steps. Remember the last FOMC meeting where he lowered the rate at which rates are going to go up, which is very dovish, but he then somehow did the impossible and convinced us that he's a hawk with this higher terminal rate. And the market took that seriously for about a day or two and has then taken that back. And I presume his speech was, because there was nothing new in it, we're back to normal, right? And so the context here is, of course, right, the Fed needs to hike rates. And hiking rates means you want to break something. You want to tighten financial conditions, but you don't want to do too much of it. And so it's this cliff walk that he's going back and forth. And so the most recent discussion that he had was that, yep, I'm fine where we are right now. And so sure enough, the horse is off to the races and the market was jumping higher. Which of course means now he has to use the sledgehammer again to dampen enthusiasm.
Well, that's the point, right? Where so we also got a bunch of jobs data last week, right? That essentially said unemployment's still, pretty darn low, and the Fed has a dual mandate, and it's doing fine on the unemployment part, right? And Powell has said in the past, look, if I've got to sacrifice one for the other at this point, given how bad inflation is, I'm going to sacrifice jobs. And so the data he's looking at right now presumably says, yeah, there's no problem in the jobs market. Feel free to keep on hiking. Yeah. And then the market is basically easing financial conditions in a way the Fed would not like it to. Yeah. So the Fed has to your point.
The reason that there was a counter trend was really through the tax changes that happened and the cutting of red tape in the previous administration. And you may love or hate that previous president, but he really got that job market to shift to higher gear. And now, of course, we have red tape being the flavor of the day, and not exactly providing incentives to go back to work. Now, of course, some of these, the obstacles to go back to work, like daycare being available, vaccines being available, those sort of things have come about. But that's not enough to go back to pre-pandemic levels. And so, and then of course you've got sufficient of a welfare system that if you don't want to be in the labor market, you don't necessarily have to be. And so people got a taste of what it is to be on the sideline. And so it's going to be very, very difficult to get that labor participation rate up. And in the meantime, not all the underlying data in the jobs report was so great. And let's not forget, right, those things do act with a lag. That's why I pointed out to the manufacturing numbers not looking great. And then what's not in that report is, of course, money supply, right? Money supply is coming down. And that is an indicator that that this economy is indeed slowing, and it's slowing fast.
Okay, great. And we're going to get to that point right now. But I think this is a really important point just to surface for folks to clearly understand, which is Powell is saying, look, I'm doing what I can do. Right, I'm going to bring demand down to try to keep inflation under control. That is going to result in less jobs going forward. But we still have this jobs worker mismatch, and we need workers to keep the economy going, and therefore you guys, Congress, you've got to do some stuff to try to boost the labor supply here. Did I capture that correctly?
No.
Okay.
I had to take a note because I was afraid you'd go too far. You have drunk the Kool-Aid like everybody else. Powell says, I can do what I can do. No, he could resign. He can do much more than he is doing. It is just unacceptable that the Fed has given us the Great Depression, Great Inflation 1, Great Inflation 2. Larry Summers, whom I'm not a fan on many topics, he said, in order to get out of inflation, we need a new framework. And what Powell said last week, he was asked about this idiotic backward inflation averaging thing. And he said, oh, we're going to look at that at our next review in 2025, 2026. But we got to get through this. The Fed is going to be late. It's going to be late reacting to rising inflation. And of course, now with this higher for longer theme, they're boxing themselves in to being late on the other side of things. It's just an inappropriate way to conduct policy. It screams everybody in the face. And I disagree with this notion that Powell does everything that he can do. No, you have to change the system, if not break the system.
Don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you are concerned about a material recession next year, and keeping the dot-com bust and the great financial crisis in mind. Right now, where would your gut kind of put it in terms of the magnitude that you think it could be?
How deep a recession will be? Well, it depends when the Fed is going to get cold feet. But Milton Friedman used to say the Fed policy acts with a long and variable lag. And that's, in my view, absolutely true, right? And so it's unprecedented in history how much money supply is contracting right now. We continue to hike rates. If we were to follow a Taylor rule, we should be cutting rates right now. Now, we should be cutting rates, obviously, from a much, much higher level. And that's part of the mess that we are in. But it means that the Fed is going to do extensive damage, especially since they've boxed themselves in with the higher for longer, because the only credibility they have is that higher for longer slogan, right? And that's one of the reasons. I'm not just saying we should get rid of the discretionary power of the Fed because they've done something wrong, but because truly the entire kind of feedback loop that they have is not working. And that is why we're going to create so much more damage than is necessary. And even if and when we do create that damage, it doesn't mean we'll have beaten inflation. We'll create a lot of damage.